My name is Jien Min, and as said earlier, I graduated and got my law degree from University of Leeds, and I'm currently residing in Manchester because I just completed the BPC course in Manchester, U Law. I want to preface this by saying that I did not take any other course such as the LLM at U Law. I only took the BPC course, and thus I can only impart my experience on that front. So yeah, I started my course in at ULaw. I joined the September 2023 intake, and my course ended this year May, so it's 9 months in total. Um, I had class, as mentioned earlier, I had classes twice a week, and one day would be for criminal, the other would be civil, and each day will be separated into two classes. The first one would be litigation, and the second will be a skill session. Each session will last around 2 hours. In regards to the litigation class for the day, it's not really a lecture. What essentially happens is you are given reading on the portal online on ULaw, and you and the class will then have a conversation to discuss the reading material that you are given. All right. I would like to preface by saying that please do not mistaken the litigation class for a lecture class. This is not a lecture at all, not a lecture that you will be familiar with in university, anyways. And instead, I highly recommend trying to complete as much of the reading material that they give you as possible, as the whole session is more of a discussion and a Q&A session with your lecturers and other students. And doing the reading really will help you in this class. In relation to the latter part of the day, which would be sorry, the skill session, sorry. It's very similar to litigation, but instead of just reading material, you are given specific tasks to do, such as completing questions, drafting certain documents, reading certain case papers, prepping for advocacy sessions and whatnot. This session will mostly depend on what's on the agenda for the day. It's always different. You could have a session that's mostly comprised of like writing and drafting, like opinion writing and like drafting sessions, or you could have more fun sessions, in my opinion, advocacy sessions such as cross-examination, examination in chief, and conveyancing sessions. Before I move on, I like to say something I think is really important. There is a module, there is a subject called professional ethics in ULaw, just like every other bar BPC course. This isn't taught extensively at ULaw. They have one class where they teach you professional ethics, but the rest of it you have to study yourself. And like everything else, I do not recommend studying for professional ethics a week before your exam. Just try and read as much as you can on weekends whenever you have less work, because I think it's very important. A lot of people forget that ethics isn't taught, and they reach the end of the year before the exams and they're like, where's my classes? Like, they don't teach you professional ethics. So yeah, my course is split into 2 semesters, as I said earlier. For my intake, it was September to December and then January to May. For my first semester, I had one exam out of the 9. So I had a conveyancing exam at the first semester, and for the next semester, the second semester, I had to take all my other papers at the second semester. So yes, ULaw is definitely a very second semester heavy um, bar school, I would say. In terms of how to prepare for the bar course, I like to start off with advice that my lecturer personally has given me, that I think is very useful, which is to try and imagine yourself in the middle of an ocean, sort of. It sounds very intimidating, but the bottom line is that if you just keep swimming every single day, you will make it ashore. I think this analogy is very accurate in the bar school, because you will genuinely be swamped with reading and work. No one's going to sugarcoat that. The amount of workload, like from uni or anything, is going to be significantly higher. But the most important thing is just try to do work, any amount of work, no matter how big or how small. Just do some work every day, and it doesn't matter how little it is. It will put you in a much better position, genuinely. In terms of the reading given, I will say that some of the reading workload required of you at times is genuinely unrealistic. But in my opinion, you should expect such a workload as you are taking the bar course in a sense. Um, some days you might be given 1 or 2 days to complete the reading, but it still genuinely isn't enough. But this is where you fall into a trap. I know some of my friends, some people in my bar course, they have the mindset that, oh, I didn't complete the reading over the weekend or whatever. And because of that, there's no point going to class. I can't participate in the discussion. Why should I go to class to begin with? Do not do this. Genuinely, the best advice I can give you is do not do this. This is where the keep swimming analogy comes in. Even if I personally fail to complete any reading prior to my class, and this happens, I'll be honest, more than I like to admit. To be fair, I have been to classes without doing any reading at all. But the most important thing is you still have to go to all your classes, because no matter what, you will learn something. The classes will sound like a different language entirely if you don't do your reading. But if you don't do your reading or do little reading, still, please go to your classes. Skipping classes will cripple your progress significantly, on top of ruining your student visa, of course. Um, Most importantly, the amount of material you go through every single day is huge. This is a good and bad thing. The bad thing is if you skip your class, it will put you significantly more behind. But the good thing about such a huge amount of material is that even if you don't know what's happening, something will stick. So just keep going to classes, just keep swimming. Another advice I can give, which is quite general advice, is that you've probably all heard before, is try and treat the bar course like a 9 to 5 in a sense. Um, I try to treat my bar course like a 9 to 5. Every weekday I try to study at 9 or like 10 a.m. and I'll study around 5. Sometimes it was like close to exam periods, just I go on full on 9 to 9 with taking breaks in the middle, of course. It's just that the sheer amount of material that you have to digest every week is genuinely too much to handle at times. So if you treat the course like a 9 to 5, it's much more easier to go through more material, I guess. And in order of studying, in my opinion, as mentioned earlier, you do have a lecture and skills session per day. All right. And the order to prepare for that, to me, I feel that my personal recommendation is to do the skill session first. Because if you do the skill session first, you will get to see how the material gets applied practically. And because you see how it's applied practically, you then go into the reading more in depth later. Because you know how it applies practically, it's just easier to digest, sort of. Yeah. And in relation to studying tips, I think it's just very generic. Study with your friends. It's very important to study with your friends. Exchange past year papers, as what Miss Alicia was saying earlier. The litigation papers are the toughest papers you will ever take. And I say this with a degree of confidence, as you will hear statistics. Oh, the passing rate for the litigation paper is 60%. But it's very different when you actually take the paper and experience 50 to 60% of your friends failing the papers. It is genuinely very, very hard. But I'm not trying to put you off to the papers, because it is genuinely doable. Do pass your papers, and most importantly, trade past your papers with your friends. If you set up a sort of a trading system with your friends, I have a certain year, you have a certain year, just trade as much as possible, because you cannot pass this course alone. You need your friends with you. Also, take note that maybe do not do certain past year papers beyond a certain year. For example, I did not go past 2019, because beyond 2019, the law, for especially criminal law, some law will change. And if you do the papers, past year papers, and you mark yourself, and certain questions that you think you got it right, but like in the older past year papers you got it wrong, you might just confuse yourself more, because the law will have changed by then already. Another very good tip for studying is, please email your lecturers as much as possible. They are there to help you. I've used and abused my ULaw emails so many times whilst being a student there. Do not be afraid to email your tutor and regarding any questions you have at all. I've shamelessly emailed my lecturer on weekends, in odd hours, and whatever, and they will always deal with my questions, whatever questions they may be, as soon as possible on weekdays and whatnot. They are very helpful. They will never shun you off, shoo you off. Just email them. They are there to help you. Before moving on, is there any other questions? Because I'll be moving on to the inner experience, but that's all my question. That's it for ULaw itself. Is there any other questions?
No, for now. You
Okay.
can move on.
Yeah. Going into the ins of court and qualifying session experience. Me personally, great. I'm a member at Gray's Inn, and I'll be very honest, I'm not entirely sure the differences between all the inns of court. In my head, they're all quite similar. I don't see much differences. I mainly chose Gray's Inn because there were the least amount of Asians there out of the other courts, out of the other inns, which would mean, most importantly, less competition when booking any of your qualifying sessions. But my opinion is to join whatever inn you're comfortable with, and most importantly, if you want to join a certain inn, try to apply for the inn earlier. Just make things much easier. In relation to qualifying sessions, you will have 10 qualifying. I was in Manchester, so I had 10 qualifying sessions you need to complete before you get called. And you will also have 5 topics that you have to cover in general. This means that among 10 of your qualifying sessions, you have to complete 5. You have to complete all 5 subjects. You can leave a single subject out where you don't complete any qualifying sessions in that particular subject itself. On top of this, you also have something called a PIA, which is a preparation in advance. QS. Most qualifying sessions you attend to, they are just like a lecture. You go in there, you sit. I join mostly online because I'm in Manchester and not in London, but like even in the London ones itself, a lot of them is just a lecture. You go in there and you sit and you watch. And when you're done, you just leave. And the thing is, they don't want you to just join sessions and just listen and not pay attention, sort of. So what they have is they set a certain amount of qualifying sessions where you have to actually prepare in advance. Such as for me, I had to do a plea mitigation in front of 2 judges in London recently, which was really, really fun. And on top of that, there were other qualifying sessions where it's just a group discussion. And there will be a set amount. I'm not sure the amount, but I think it might be different for every inn. But they will brief you on this upon your arrival at the inn and upon your first QS. They will brief you on all of this. On top of this, as I said earlier, I'm studying in Manchester and I'm not a student in London. You should be aware that you would have to book these QS sessions much more in advance, particularly if you're in the northern circuit, such as me. I'm not in London. You should book your QS much earlier in advance because, for example, if you plan to do a bulk of your qualifying sessions at the end of your final exams, make sure you start looking out and booking your qualifying sessions at the start of your second semester. If you were to start looking into and booking qualifying sessions at the end of your final exam, you most probably will not get any qualifying sessions at all because that's just how competitive it is. There's so many people taking law now, so many people in the inns. It's just you have to book your sessions earlier. And on top of that, I also recommend, especially you law students, please do not leave all your qualifying sessions at the second semester. As I said earlier, second semester is extremely heavy for you law. So what my personal recommendation is, maybe do 6 qualifying sessions at the first semester and 4 qualifying sessions at the second semester. It's just even things out much more. Yeah. Moving on to how to improve advocacy. In relation to advocacy sessions in ULaw, I think the best advice anyone could give is to practice. Practice on anyone you can. Practice on a partner, practice on your housemates, classmates, anyone. This obviously does not apply to an exam setting. I do not condone cheating, but for normal sessions, please practice as much as you can. For individuals who are very fluent in English, do not get too cocky. Do not underestimate advocacy sessions just because you have a good command of English. That's exactly what happened to me, and I paid the price for it. You can never be too good at advocacy, and remember that our standard of what a good grasp of the English language is differs greatly from the standards here in the UK. And for individual who are less fluent in the English language, do not give up, please. I beg you, do not give up. I have had friends in my class who converse mostly in Chinese from Malaysia, and they force themselves throughout the course to speak English at every opportunity. And they also actively seek help from other students and whatnot in their class to practice advocacy. And through all that hard work, they went from getting a failing grade at the start of the course to getting a high distinction. This is extremely possible, and I believe that anyone and everyone can do this. And yeah, that's all my experience. That's all the experience and information I have to pass on for today. If you have any questions, feel free.